welcome back to the Great Tribal Warriors of Bharat monthly series. This is the third and final episode of the September edition of the series. So before we move on to the details of what's going to be covered, let's do a quick recap of what was covered in episodes 1 and 2. In episode 1, we focused on the contributions of Komaram Bheem, the Gond leader, and focused more on how he fought for land rights for his people. His fight was mainly against the Razakars of the Nizam and the Janglat police, who were nurtured by the zamindars, and they were all hand in glove with the British administration, which made it doubly, triply, quadruply difficult for the Gond people to get their rights back. The episode ends by describing the valiant fight which Komaram Bheem and his small group of people put up against the Deputy Commissioner Abdul Sattar, who had been actually sent out for a peace mission, sort of mission that aimed at bringing together, aimed at reconciliation, but which failed and led to the brutal death of Komaram Bheem and so many of his loyal followers. In episode 2, we focused on the contributions of Baburao Shedmake, who set up the 500-strong Jangum Sena in the context of the mutiny which had broken out in 1857 to take on the British troops stationed at Nagpur to reassert their independence. Just to recap, Baburao Shedmake was the king of Chanda, an independent kingdom that had been existing since the time of the Mughals. But then with Nagpur becoming a protectorate of the British, it lost its independence. So Baburao Shedmake decided to take advantage of the mutiny that broke out in 1857, and together with Venkatrao set up his Jangum Sena, and they did commendable work bringing down, disrupting British administration throughout the region, and this was a huge cause of concern for the Deputy Commissioner William Crichton, so much so that he decided to get into an alliance with the Zamindarin of Ahiri, Lakshmi Bai, and it's really very difficult to understand what the alliance aimed was at hatching a conspiracy or just get help for the natural course of intelligence, British intelligence, that would take over and capture Baburao. It's really not clear. Or was it that Baburao himself got trapped in a beautifully laid out setup by Lakshmi Bai and William Crichton? Things are not really clear, but what is really very evident is that Baburao's downfall came about because of the handiwork of these two people. So the episode focuses in detail about this incident, and I hope you would like to check it out. The link is provided in the pinned comment below this video. I hope you find it quite useful. We'd like to begin this episode by remembering the contributions of another Gond king, Ramji Gond. While it's true that not much is really known about him, what is commendable to recollect is that he was one of those few Gond chiefs who, even after the mutiny, kept up the spirit of rebelling against British administration. By 1860, a lot of the effects of the mutiny had been quelled, yet in the region which we today call as Nirmal and Adilabad, despite the best attempts of the British resident Colonel Cuthbert Davidson to ensure that there is no more of these kinds of attacks breaking out, there were certain Gond chiefs who kept up incessant attacks on the administration machinery. One of them was Ramji Gond, and while we do not have access to probably existing written records available locally as to the details of how he was arrested or how he actually carried out his plans, we do understand that he was quite successful because he had literally been a pain in the neck for the resident. So in September 1860, 17th of September 1860, when he was finally arrested, his trial held, and he was sentenced to death by hanging, the resident was a much relieved man. How the arrest happened and where exactly the execution was carried out is not something that we are privy to at the moment, but we do appreciate all the efforts, the valiant and the bravery displayed by Ramji Gond in ousting the British from the region. Have you ever wondered how these rebellions communicated with the administration? If writing letters is the only thing that you can think of, then here's something new for you. And you can learn that from the Santhal Hul. The Santhal Hul that broke out in the June of 1855 had progressed to Bheem by the month of September that year. And over there, they wanted to give out a warning to the administration, the district magistrate's office, that they had 3 days' time to address their grievances, failing which they would resort to plunder. And how did they do that? Well, they made use of the branch of the sal tree. The Hul, as we all know, was led by the four Murmu brothers, Sidhu, Kanu, Chand, Bhairav. So under the direction of Kanu, Bhairav got hold of a dark runner. Actually, the more appropriate word would be he kidnapped a dark runner and threatened him into delivering this sal branch. Now, it wasn't just an ordinary sal branch. It was a branch that had 3 leaves in it. Each of the leaves indicated 1 day's time. So the 3 leaves indicated the 3 days' time, the actual time period that the Santhal people were giving to the office of the district magistrate to come to some kind of a conclusion which was mutually acceptable, failing which they had to brace for attack. And that's exactly what happened. The office of the district magistrate spent all its 3 days trying to figure out what their plan of action should be, and by the time the warning period was up, and they had to face the music of the Santhal. And finally, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing to you Tantya Mama. Mama, as we all know, is the term for maternal uncle in so many Indian languages and dialects. So why was this one figure from the history of Indian freedom struggle an uncle to so many of us? Well, that's a very interesting question. And the answer to that is much more mind-boggling. Think the combination of Tarzan, Guy Fawkes and Robin Hood all roll into one. That is, in case you're familiar with Western literature and history. If not, then Tantya Mama in the Indian context is one of his own kind. He is unparalleled and he definitely deserves the hero worship that he gets even today, so many years, more than a century after his life and death. In this episode though, we are going to focus on the trial of Tantya Mama and what makes it so different from that of the others. Tantya Mama, very briefly, was born in 1842 in Nimar district to a farming couple, and he grew up as a very mild-mannered, affectionate, loving boy. He certainly had no trace of being aggressive, even in the most remote sense of the word. But yes, he was physically quite strong, because there have been numerous instances where people found him saving life and property from very strong animals, wild animals, even though he was just a toddler or a young boy. So he had great physical strength, which he intended to put to use in farming, not to harm people or become a dacoit or get into banditry. But the life situation changed when his father passed away and the zamindars refused to give him what was his due. And so he had to resort to violent means of getting justice. Now, because the zamindars were hand in glove with the police and the administration, it became really very difficult for the young man Tantya to get any kind of justice for himself, to get people to even listen to him, to his side of the story. So against his own will, and in order to save his own life as a means of survival, he had to escape to the forest, keep running from one place to another, and make a living out of thieving, stealing, and yet he was also driven by the sense that nobody else should suffer a similar fate. And so he ended up doing these things and distributing the loot out of these raids amongst all the poor and needy people. And so while in the eyes of the administration and zamindars and of course the police, he was a dacoit, a bandit. For the poor helpless people in Nimar and Jabalpur, he was nothing short of a messiah. And that's why they had always addressed him as Mama. For instance, once when he was out, he ran into a wedding procession and he requested that the bride and groom be brought to him, and he blessed them and he gave them money. At other occasions, he would hand over money just out of no reason to little children and ask them to go and buy sweets for themselves and have a little fun at the village fair. So that was the kind of person that he was. And yet, this person was pushed to the edge so much due to injustice that he had to resort to a very desultory life. The relation between the police and Tantya was very interesting because every time the police tried to nab him, he would not just escape. The police would be left wondering where did he even come from? Forget about how he managed to escape. And the few times that they managed to actually put him behind the bars, how he managed to escape, fly away literally, disappear into the thin air, left them baffled. So on the 28th of September 1889, when he was finally arrested, the Assistant Superintendent of Police went overboard in transporting him to the Jabalpur jail under extremely heavy security blanket, so that there was absolutely no way he could pull another vanishing trick. The trial started on the 28th of September itself, and it was a really very long trial lasting till the 9th of October. There were 8 witnesses who testified against him, and that included Jashoda, who was once upon a time his fiancée. She testified against him, and this really broke his heart, but he chose not to cross-examine any of them by simply stating that they are all lying. And so, at the end of the trial, he was charged under sections 395 and 97 of the Indian Penal Code. The magistrate held him responsible for dacoity and murder, mutilation, and so he was sentenced to death by hanging. More about who Tantya Mama was is going to be put up in a future episode, so I hope you will choose to hang on to this channel. If not, or if you have doubts, then please subscribe so that when that episode comes live, you don't miss it.